Hey everybody, this is Mark Smith, host of Digital Roughnecks, and I'm here with Arooshi Dahiya. Welcome, Arooshi.
Hi, Mark. I'm so happy to be here.
So tell me about your company and what you guys do, and then we'll talk about how we got connected and the problem that we're kind of working on together.
Sure. I'm the co-founder of a company called Oren. At Oren, what we do is ESG data management. I think one term that all of us are hearing a lot these days and is part of board agenda is ESG, right? But ESG reporting is the end result, and a big process that has to happen before that is the data management piece, right? And it's not only data collection, there are also lots of these calculations that have to happen on top of that data. So we kind of handle all of that. Any ESG report that you look at, there are about 500 to 1,000 little data points that really go into it. So we've built a software that manages all of that and helps companies create a final ESG report. They can also kind of measure their progress in real time on the sustainability goals they set as well.
Now, the SEC just announced that they're going to require mandatory, climate financial reporting for all publicly traded companies in the U.S., but there are actually other countries that have been doing this for a while. Like, can you tell me some of the other countries that your clients are in that already have gone through this process?
Oh, yes. So we have clients in Hong Kong, Singapore, India right now. And this has been, I think starting this financial year is when it has been made mandatory. And it's slightly different across these regions is in India, it's mandatory only for the top 1,000 listed companies. While for Singapore and Hong Kong, I believe all the listed companies have to do some amount of ESG disclosures. These regulations are also present across Europe. Europe has been extremely stringent about this for the last, 8 to 10 years. The UK has been extremely strong around this. Even Canada, actually, a couple of months ago is when they also put some regulation around this.
Okay. Well, I definitely know that it's caught the attention of the US oil and gas companies, right? It going from sort of manual or voluntary reporting to now required reporting. It's created a level of seriousness. Now, one of the, just like I keep up on the whole EPA regulations and read their 500 plus page reports, you just got done reading the SEC's 500 page proposed deal, and you've summarized it in this presentation we're about to see. So I'd love to see what some of the summary and the things that go into this new, SEC proposed regulation.
Absolutely. I would love to. I mean, it's just so nice, talking about this because, I mean, I just feel like I've achieved something. I mean, the 500 pages that I read, I can put it to use here. So happy to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But before I dive into this, I'd like to talk about why it's happening now, right? I talked about that India has been doing this, the EU, UK, Canada, they've all done this, but SEC has only came out with this proposal just now. And the reason for that is President Biden has been extremely vocal about putting USA back towards this race for net neutrality, right? And he's also set a 2030 target to reduce the GHG emissions by 50% from to the 2005 levels, right? And he's right now also put forth a budget of about $5.8 trillion to boost further funding towards federal environmental agencies, putting money towards climate research and resiliency of the entire country, right? Because I think for us as a country, we're so big, and our entire and it's so diverse, right? That there's the ocean, and that there are rivers, and there are forest fires happening, and there's flooding happening across some regions. We also see that the occurrences of hurricane really increasing over time. I believe like a couple of months ago that there were torrential rain in New York, which like rainfall like that hadn't been seen in years. Right, so when we see occurrences of climate-related events happening more and more every year, and that's where this entire budget is kind of targeted towards, right? But all of this cannot be achieved without the support of corporates, right? And actually any country's climate action plan is incomplete without the cooperation of the corporates, right? And the way corporates do this is by making ESG commitments, right? Wherein commitments or maybe taking ESG related actions. And what this typically means is that companies have to kind of quantify and talk about what their impact on environment, right? Which is the kind of energy they consume, right? Whether it's renewable or non-renewable, right? How much waste they generate and how much of it they reuse, how much of it do they recycle, how much water do they utilize, how much of it is reused, recycled, right? If they have any circular economy, circularity practices in place, all of that comes under environmental. Your social is all about your stakeholders, and stakeholders are essentially people, right? Your employees, your customers, your business partners, your shareholders, media, regulators, investors, everyone. Like, what kind of practices you have in place for that? What kind of well-being or health and safety or benefits that you provide to your workers and your employees, right? What kind of practices you have in place for your supplies, right? For your suppliers, right? And governance is essentially just having policies and practices in place, right? To ensure ethical and transparent governance practices, right? Anti-bribery, anti-corruption policies, anti-sexual harassment policies, so on and so forth. So this is essentially what these companies are expected to now talk about publicly, right? This is holding a lot, I mean, as much importance as your financial disclosures in the boardroom today. Now we've talked about ESG. I'd also like to spend some time about on what does ESG integration mean, right? For a company today who is at ground zero, if they want to bring in some ESG into their operations, where do they start, and what is the path ahead for them? I've put together these 6 points, but it's extremely complex. Like this might seem simple, but it's kind of complex, and it's an extremely long process as well. This entire thing also sometimes takes more than a year to kind of put together, right? So the first step is for you to really for the company to question themselves about regarding why are they doing this, right? Why ESG? Who is the audience for this ESG integration, right? There are some companies that want to do it because they believe that, hey, it's my responsibility to do it. But sometimes companies tend to do it for their regulators, for their investors, for their customers, right? Because they see massive demand for certain disclosures on that front, right? They also have to think about that, what are the frameworks that are most relevant to me and my type of business? Also depending on my geography.
So
One interesting example.
Let me ask you just
yeah.
Sorry. From your perspective, looking at a lot of different companies, inside and outside the energy, would you say the energy companies though are further along in thinking this because they have full-time environmental people on already, right? And they have stakeholders like local governments, state governments, they have to, they're heavily regulated already. So does that kind of give them a little bit of a head start in all this?
Absolutely. The energy companies, that sector all in all is one of the most regulated in the world, right? In any country you go to, it's one of the most regulated, and hence they're extremely cautious about. We talked about governance, right? I believe that the governance is really up to the mark, and even in terms of their understanding of frameworks in general, right? Their kind of time to market regarding some of these framework implementation is also extremely fast. So you're 100% correct about that.
So let's get to because I think the next slide gets to the specific things that are in the new SEC side, right? Like how do they come up with this? Did they make it out of thin air? Or were they using some of their existing frameworks? Talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. So the SEC proposal is based on two frameworks. The first one is TCFD, which is Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and the other one is the GHG protocol. The reason why they went ahead with TCFD is because today this is one of the most widespread framework out there. the investors love it because it requires these companies to talk about lots of climate related risks and opportunities that their business presents, right? And kind of map it to the financial impacts that will have on the business. So it's one of the most widely accepted, adopted amongst investors. The investors really understand this information. It's not some complex things like waste management, water management, etc., that the investor might not understand. So it's extremely targeted towards the investors. And again, this is the framework that has been used by Europe, UK, Canada, etc. as well. So this was one of the reasons why the SEC chose this one. The second one is the GHG protocol, and this is kind of the gold standard for any company or any city or any country to do any accounting towards their greenhouse gases. So that's why the second one.
Okay. And based on you looking at the 500 pages, are those SECs primarily focused on scope 1 and 2, not 3, right?
Correct. So so the SEC is and I think if we also look at the energy company example, or actually any company for that matter, scope 1 and 2 is fairly easier. It's not easy, but it's easier to quantify and measure across the organization, right? And the reason for that is because scope 1 requires you to look at your owned assets, or all the assets that the company owns themselves, their factories, their own offices, etc. While your scope two is looking at the amount of energy you consume in the form of heating or electricity, etc. Scope 3 requires you to look at your entire supply chain, your upstream and downstream supply chain, right? Which is looking at like right where the raw material was sourced to the other end, on how the consumer really consumes that product or service. Right? So it's extremely hard to quantify that end-to-end piece. So if around this, the SEC is kind of being slightly lenient, and they're okay with you. They want you to definitely talk about your scope 1 and 2, but your scope 3 is only if you've done that quantification, and they highly encourage you to do that quantification over time. In the first year, it's okay if you don't do it.
Okay. All right, good.
Beyond that, we talked about E, S, and G, right? This particular disclosure proposal mainly focuses, and same as with TCFD, on the E and the G part, right? And that's because this is communication to the investors. So the regulation really wants you to take a deep look at your business, right? Identify what are some of the climate related risks and opportunities that that come in front of you today and over the near future, right? How that aligns with your business growth plans, right? And then ensuring that your company's board, your company's management, everyone's aware of what these risks and opportunities are, and every business decision that's taken on that kind of reflects that knowledge, right? And the disclosure also kind of wants you to also quantify, also kind of show what's the material impact of these climate risks and opportunities on the consolidated financial statements, right? We'll definitely talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides, but any questions so far?
No, yeah, show that other slide, because I think that really helps kind of bring
Yeah.
it down from what are the factors down into, okay, yeah, this one.
Yeah, this really puts it all together. So climate risks and opportunities, right? Climate risks are of two types: your transition risks and the physical risks. And I will kind of talk about these, taking an example of energy companies itself, right? So transition under transition risks, you have policy and legal risks, right? And a risk here could be the increase in the cost of operation, right? Because maybe your compliance cost is going high, or maybe because of your industry, you are charged a higher risk premium, right? So these are some risks on the policy and legal front. Then comes your technology. There are newer technologies coming up that are maybe lower in terms of their emissions, and that's why they are sometimes easier to adopt. Some of these technologies might also be cheaper than the product and services that you as a company provide, right? And we were talking about this earlier, right? In some locations, wind is just extremely cheap, right? It's much cheaper than oil and gas. So that makes it might make logical sense for the residents of that region to kind of pick that up as an energy source for themselves. Market, right? Market, again, like a change in consumer sentiment towards lesser emission solutions, right? Or just generally the market risk, right? As we see with the war in Ukraine and Russia, the market has really changed a lot, and we none of us could have predicted or expected this. So that's another risk that comes there. And last but not the least is the reputation risk. Right now, there is a lot of stigmatization around the oil and gas industry in general, right? So that's a risk that also has to be considered, and that could also lead towards lowering of the available capital for some of these companies, right? Because all of these asset managers now have their own net zero goals, they have their own commitments, so they have to consider that when they're making some of these capital allocation decisions. The next one is physical risk, and this is pretty straightforward, which is risks that the changing weather kind of put forth on your business, right? This could be in the form of some impact is like the rising sea level, right? Or the rise in the mean temperature. This could maybe disrupt your supply chain because of flooding in some areas or something of that sort. This could also increase the cost of employee health and safety initiatives for your organization, because it's just too hot to work this summer than was last summer. So these are some of the risks, and there are multiple. I'm happy to kind of share this deck with you. I have an appendix.
Yeah, on the opportunity side, which is the plus side, right? Where you say, okay, well, I see that that companies might pay a premium for lower methane gas. So there's a plus side, or there's opportunities around maybe taking some of the money that I'm making now in oil and gas and putting them toward other energy sources like, hydrogen or solar or whatever. Yeah, so there's the opportunity side. So then you take those and you write some stuff up in the strategic planning and risk management, but then they boil down to actual numbers. So
yes.
How does that work? So does it work saying, okay, you're making like a forward-looking statement and saying, okay, this is what I would normally do, but here's my risk factors, which could potentially take some stuff down. So I'm going to put some potential, allocate some liabilities in the book, but I'm also saying, hey, I got these other opportunities that are related to this, different energy sources, premium. I could sell my gas at a premium because the market's willing to pay more for low and methane. You put all those, the plus side, and then they somehow flow down to the actual numbers.
Correct. Yes, correct. Right. Here again, I think if anyone if anyone has to raise some capital today, they have to do some forward-looking projections, right? And like you said, right, and you articulated really well that you have to incorporate both sides of this equation, do some plus and minus, and kind of ensure that your investor is well aware of what your business growth plans are, and again, pertaining to that, what kind of risks and opportunities that business plan presents.
So I think the big change here is that you're going from what I would call sort of the net zero promise to where now you need to just go to the net zero proof.
Correct.
Right? You're having to show, before you could just say, hey, we're going to be the cleanest energy company that ever lived. Now you got to say, and here's all the proof. And because you mentioned in your software that you're tracking 500 to 1,000 different data points that get tracked. I'm assuming those are, you're translating these risks and opportunities into specific numbers that can be tracked over time to show your progress.
Correct. Yes, and so lots of these things are not are not very direct. Sometimes there is some amount of subjectivity that does get built in, and that has to be incorporated for, right? But I think I want to just take a step back, and something you articulated really well again is the net zero proof, right? So just having this report out once is not enough. The SEC expects you to set forth some goals and you have to prove year on year on what you're doing to achieve those sustainability goals or your net zero goals, or that's what kind of translates into your net zero proof. So just constant progress has to be shown, and over time and your shareholders that they kind of step up, and they want to look at how is the board agenda designed around achieving, lowering these risks and increasing the opportunities there, and what is the management doing towards that. Over time, what happens in the long term is that the management compensation gets linked to the achievement of some of these
Mm-hmm.
goals, right? So that's another very interesting piece that comes from this.
Yeah, on the governance side, and I've heard that over and over from the C-level execs that they have bonuses and different things tied to hitting these goals. So
Yeah.
what are the time? So based on reading this 500-page report, they're going to be getting input from different people and stuff like that. But when do you think this will start to roll out?
I think very soon, actually. The SEC has put this out for a couple of weeks, and I think we should hear back from them very soon, within the next few months, on what the next steps are around this.
Okay.
But so far, they've got thumbs up. I think lots of these technology companies have really supported this move, and that's because these companies have been doing this even before there was a regulation around this. So one I can think of right now is, I think, Apple, Google, etc. They've really kind of congratulated and really kind of supported SEC to this move. So yeah.
So so what would somebody, if they're interested in kind of finding out more about how you help with this whole SEC, or what would they need to do?
You can get in touch with me, right?
Yep.
Happy to have a conversation around this.
Yep. And we'll keep talking too, because I think our companies, with Clean Connect and your company will be working, because we produce a lot of data, I believe, that could be, pulled into your system to help these companies transition from, as I said, net zero promise to net zero proof. So
yeah. No, yes, Mark, just one quick point is that, and is that I think with what you do, you really target the opportunity side. I think that there's just this negative perception around ESG that, it's going to make me look bad. That is not always true. Once you kind of dig deep into your system, a lot of good comes out of it. You could really implement lots of resource efficiency and energy efficiency. And then even with what you do with the methane intensity, right, that could really create opportunities that the company didn't know earlier.
Yeah, in fact, I had a ESG for Energy conference, and in there, we interviewed Triple Crown Resources, and they ended up discussing 7 different ways to monetize ESG, all positive ROI, all achievable within 12 months. So actually, they have kind of gone, from looking at it as a negative to a positive, right? Where they've actually made money from it, right? So yeah, while there is the left side of the screen, transition risk, which you got to deal with, it's just part of doing business in the energy world. There's a lot of opportunities, new products, services, markets, shifting your energy sources, all that kind of stuff. Plenty of opportunity on the right side. So that's the takeaway from this. Yeah, it's something new, but really there's tremendous opportunity on the upside so far from the companies I'm talking to. So Arooshi, thanks again for doing this and taking the time to read that 500-page report and boil it down for us. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Again, show
Thank you
your
so much, Mark,
show
for
your
having
contact
me.
info again.
Yeah,
and people
sure,
get a hold of you there. And again, I'll have links in all the show notes to your company and any kind of presentation you can share. So thanks again.
For sure. Thank you.